Hey everybody, Plushie here. So today I just wanted to make a very casual video sort of recapping all of the buffs we got this anniversary and how I feel about them. Obviously this is still going to be kind of a first impression even though I didn't do it immediately after it drops, but still it's just within a week of time, so the opinions can definitely change if we have more synergy pieces that pop up in the future, for example. But yeah, this is just going to be a super casual video. Hope you enjoy. Let's get into this. So on day 1, we got a Benienma buff. Her first skill gained a 3-turn 30% arts up as well as a 30 MP battery. So this is a pretty nice buff. It makes Benienma a 50 MP charger because she already has a party-wide 20 MP battery. And the extra arts up helps with her damage as well as her gain. And especially on the damage side, I do feel like she is a little bit lacking in self-steroids when she is not hitting her traits with her MP, which is chaotic or evil. So this certainly helps a lot, and it helps with her gain as well. And because she is now a 50 charger, I also think that, you know, party 20 charge, self 50 charge, and as well as a party sort of charisma effect with her skill 3, she has some form of multi-core potential. I'm not saying she's like super great at it, but you know, if you are trying to cut down a chaotic evil specifically enemy in one of your waves, then I can definitely see Benienma be used in that kind of farming team. And then we got Gilles, which is a pretty big one, honestly, in my opinion. He got a huge glow up on his tactics skill. So now he gives all lawful allies 3-turn 50% crit up. He gives all good allies a 1-time 3-turn 2-stage overcharge boost. And if there is a star attribute ally present in the front line, the skill also makes 20 stars. And without any conditions, the skill just makes 15 stars per turn for 3 turns. So this buff is really good because it's, you know, multiple layers. First and foremost, Saber Gilles is actually lawful good, and his main playstyle is to spam his MP and then buff his own face card and to, you know, hit very hard with his face cards. Well, very hard is a bit generous, but at least that's what he's trying to do, and, you know, this buff certainly helps that. The 15 stars per turn makes his crit a lot more self-sufficient, and the 3-turn 50% crit up is really impressive because this skill also has such a short cooldown at 5. He has a massive steroid now to help with his card damage. And the extra overcharge that he gets from the second effect will give him a bigger star dump after he used his MP for the first time. I don't think that one is that significant. I think, you know, the main effect that helps his own playstyle is the star per turn as well as the critical damage steroid. This skill also is very clearly themed around Jeanne d'Arc because Jeanne is a lawful good star attribute servant, but I think this skill realistically helps out other DPSs that fit the bill more. So a great example is Kukulkan, who is lawful good and a star attribute servant. So Kukulkan can definitely use the crit boost. The overcharge boost is situational, but if she's fighting against earth attribute enemies, it's great as well. And then finally, the star bomb. Kukulkan really wants that, especially on like turn 1. She needs to upgrade her own skills, and having extra star bomb is always going to be super convenient. I also think this skill benefits other units that, you know, are only lawful good a lot. For example, Tonalico as well as Bima, because Bima obviously also benefits from the crit up because crit is a big part of his playstyle, but also his overcharge is just super valuable because it adds extra hits to his MP and, you know, just boosts his MP's damage in general. And Tonalico, of course, also appreciates the crits, probably not as much as Bima, but the overcharge boost allows her to reduce cooldowns to her last resort skill very quickly. So I think Gilles just became a super niche support for specific units, and because he's free after the upgrade, you can try to pull for like a level 1 copy, and his, you know, tactics will still be buffed, and you can just have him be this level 1 sacrificial buffer that just throw down all of his skills and then die, and then have a stronger support come up. I can definitely see a lot of interesting stuff I can potentially pull with him. And on day 2, we got a Cleopatra buff, where her skill 2 got a 30 MP battery as well as a 3-turn buff success rate up. And this is just a more standard, one of those quote-unquote fixes instead of a, you know, super unique buff. The 30 MP battery does allow her to MP Buster Loop now, which if you really like her, you can use her in single core looping. And of course, it just helps her fire off her MP more easily in general. And the 3-turn buff success rate up, of course, makes her Imperial Privilege guaranteed. This helps her, you know, damage and Buster Looping because it's a very short cooldown skill. You can double stack it by turn 2. So, you know, her looping damage technically didn't actually increase, but, you know, the consistently increased by a lot. And in terms of normal play, Imperial Privilege is just such a strong skill. It makes her exceptionally tanky as well as do a lot more damage, and now having the ability to guarantee it makes her just a lot more comfortable to use. And then we got the Asclepius buff, definitely undeserved, as probably already one of the strongest 3-star casters, but what can you do about it? He got a skill 3 buff where on top of its old effects, he now also gives the entire party 20% arts up, as well as 3 turns of 100% heal boost, and finally it also gives himself a one-time 3-turn 3000 HP guts. So the party-wide 20% arts up for 3 turns is not that significant in my opinion. Like, you're still not going to use him as a looping support despite him also having like 20 party-wide battery as well as MP gain boost. It's just not as good as Shufu, unfortunately. I think the biggest part about this buff is the 3-turn heal boost by 100%. It is such a powerful effect that doubles all the heal received for the entire party, especially for a servant like him where a big part of the playstyle is actually, you know, tanking damage and then causing the entire party to live just on the guts from his MP. Being able to pull all of that HP back to, you know, a really reasonable number quickly is important so they don't immediately die right after the guts triggers. This also combos very well with his first skill, which is a whopping 5000 heal that also has a relatively short 5-turn cooldown that is targetable. So you can easily pull like an ally back to full HP right after the guts proc because that 5000 heal becomes a 10,000 heal. And finally, the self-guts effect. I know some people aren't that happy about it because there are situations where you would prefer him to just, you know, use his MP, clear your party's, you know, debuffs, and then die off. And after giving the guts with his MP as well. But I do feel like in most cases when I do need him, I want him to stay alive and provide even more value over time. And especially considering the heal boost effect that is so powerful, I think he is now a very competent healer for your party. You can just have him as the sole healer of your party, and in that kind of context, you probably also want him to stay alive. So overall, I think this is a very powerful buff. It makes other characters that are pure healers like Medea Lily look pretty bad. It also makes, you know, guts givers like Irisfield look pretty bad in my opinion. RIP, I guess, but yeah, this is a really solid buff. I can definitely see him be picked more in challenge quests in the future, especially ones that are debuff heavy or ones that, you know, will kill your party regardless of solemn defense, so the guts is needed, for example. And on day 3, first and foremost, we got an Iskandar buff. So he got a 30 MP battery on his charisma skill, as well as a 3-turn defense ignore effect for the entire party. So first and foremost, it's once again a battery buff. This allows him to Buster Loop now, just like Cleopatra. And his MP damage traditionally is very high, so of course it's very exciting for him to have the ability to Buster Loop. I will say his biggest steroid being 1 turns makes this not as broken, but still, you know, his neutral farming damage is really impressive. So for Iskandar fans, this is great. And on top of that, he also gives the entire party, including himself of course, a 3-turn defense ignore effect. And it's really rare, like we don't really have any other unit other than Sherlock Holmes that has the ability to grant allies defense ignore. This is the second ever case in the game. So obviously it's very cool. I will say if you are fighting against a challenge quest boss and you want a spammable defense ignore effect, you probably still want Holmes. But this can substitute Holmes if you don't have him in certain cases. And also I do believe he is a better choice than Holmes if there is For example, a raid boss that has a unremovable defense up as gimmick, which I think we already saw last year with the Gude Gude event. The final raid boss has an unremovable defense up, and it's a huge trouble for a lot of strong DPSs to conquer, but now with this kind of buff on Iskandar, it's immediately triggerable. You don't need to use your MP. Add on the fact that Iskandar actually has great party-wide support effects. I can definitely see him play in these niche situations. And at the very least, this gives himself defense ignore for 3 turns on a relatively short downtime. So he also can just be an ignore defense DPS in the future. So I think it's a really good buff. Then we have Nitocris Summer, who got an MP upgrade. And first and foremost, they finally moved the insta-death to after damage. So Nitocris already had a lot of potential to loop. She has really good refunds, but it's just that the insta-kill can screw her over randomly. Now it no longer can. And it also, of course, came with the MP upgrade, so her damage is very impressive now as well. Her arts looping damage at like MP2 is already very competitive versus Summer Valkyries. And if you have MP levels from 3 and beyond, I do think she is going to loop better than Summer Valkyries if we don't consider traits. The MP now also skill seals all enemies for a single turn, and even though that's not a strong effect, because of how spammable this MP is, this can potentially shut down enemy skill use for a very long period of time. And yeah, some people do consider skill seal a negative because now all enemies are guaranteed to attack, but for someone like Nitocris Summer, who has a kit that taunts herself as well as gives herself a lot of defense ups, this is obviously not that big of a negative in that aspect either. And then finally, the MP also applies a 5-turn waterside field. And very interestingly, this is unlike most other waterside field application effects. This is actually the same effect as Archwade, where she puts the status on the top right corner of your screen instead of as a buff status on herself. So it is obviously still tied to Nitocris. If Nitocris dies, the field is gone, but you cannot buff remove it because it is not considered a buff. It is considered a field effect. I wonder if they're going to upgrade all other field effects to be like this, but as of now, Nitocris Summer is actually the second ever servant that has a field effect like Archwade's Millennium Castle, which is really hilarious. I will say though, the actual important part about the buff is probably still the fact that the insta-kills after damage now and the base damage increase, making her a really competent looper. So on day 4, first and foremost, we got Abigail. Abigail's 3rd skill had its cooldown reduced to 6, and it also gives her a 1-turn 100% power mod against targets that have terror debuff on them. And it also comes with a 20 MP battery. So this is a really, really good buff because Abigail already had some form of multi-core utility. She has a 30 MP battery, but she also has a party-wide MP damage up as well as 10% MP slow charge. And now with this buff, she is a self 50 MP charger, even if we don't count the slow charge per turn. And she also gains a massive universal anti-trait for a single turn because she obviously can cast terror on the enemy with one of her skills already. And with the power mod in consideration, and we only talk about MP damage, her MP damage within a single turn actually eclipses Jolter, which is kind of insane. And Abigail can now be used as an extremely splashable multi-core farmer where you need to deal massive damage to a singular big target. So I can definitely see her be used in the future. She is essentially Kintoki with like less damage because Kintoki as a berserker still does more damage with his MP, but a lot better party-wide support ability. And I can definitely see her thrive in 90 plus pluses, and especially ones that have either berserkers, foreigners, or pretenders where she actually gets to do double damage to them with her MP, and that one turn with the anti-terror is going to essentially destroy anything in her path. So it's really cool. I think Abigail is now actually good and very good in farming on top of that, and not just for boss killing. On the same day, we also got Billy the Kid. Billy the Kid's skill 3 had its crit damage steroid bumped up from 32% for 3 turns to 50% for 3 turns. He also got a 3-turn 30% quick up, as well as a 1-turn 500% star absorb up and a 30 star bomb. So this essentially makes Billy the Kid one of the most self-sufficient low start crit DPSs, because this one skill just covers the stars, the MP steroid, the card steroid, the crit steroid, and the star absorb up. Like, this one skill, already plays out, his entire playstyle perfectly. And when combined with his first skill, he can get up to 170% self crit up for a turn. And that obviously sounds really insane, but do remember that he still only has 3-star stats, so he's not that effective at doing crit damage with his face cards as 5 stars, despite the really high steroid. But still, it is really impressive, and this allows him to push his damage to be on par with some of the 4 to 5-star rarity servants, despite only being a 3-star. And overall, it's just a great buff that plays very well into his original playstyle, and just further strengthens that playstyle. So on day 5, we got a Ruler Moriarty MP upgrade, and the only thing that changed on top of the MP damage scaling is that the 1 turn 20% MP damage up steroid is extended to 3 turns. Essentially what this means is that now he has ramp up MP damage, just like Space Ishtar, Tezcatlipoca, and Lancer Ryoma. So his MP damage is going to be very impressive because, of course, it's also an MP upgrade, and he has the MP damage ramp up, and it plays perfectly into the double Castoria plug Oberon team comp. Now, it doesn't fix the fact that he still has pretty poor MP refund, so he probably can't easily loop lower enemy number nodes, but at the very least, just as a DPS, an MP upgrade is always great to have, and the fact that he can ramp up his MP damage now helps him both in challenge quests and in farming. And on the same day, we also got a Charlotte Corday buff, where her skill 3 RNG effect, because it used to be randomly choose one, is now selectable from a menu, and it also came with a 20 star bomb. This is more of a quality of life update. I think it would have been an insane buff if she actually uses all 3 effects at once, but I guess this is pretty nice as well. I'm most focused on the fact that now you can guarantee the 3-turn 50% MP damage up steroid, because for these kind of low stars, as I mentioned with Billy the Kid, their face card damage isn't that great because of their inherently low stats, so it's very difficult to justify a crit playstyle, but their MPs still hit decently hard. Like, the really bad meme of how MP5 Spartacus hits harder than MP1 Morgan. Well, I think that's a horrible way to downplay Morgan, but that is sort of a testament to how these low stars can still do decent MP damage when compared to MP1 SSR counterparts. So I think having this 50% MP damage up steroid is really good, and I'm probably always picking that. And the 20 star bomb supports her crit playstyle, which I don't think it's very good, but it's a nice little bonus. We got yet another MP upgrade for an Arts Looper. We got Hokusai. Hokusai's MP now gives her a 30% MP game boost for a single turn before MP does damage, as well as casts a 20% arts down on all enemies for 3 turns before the MP does damage. So this obviously fixed both her damage and refund issues in terms of arts loop farming, and I definitely can see her be a respectable contender, specifically if you're looping against man attribute enemies versus some of the stronger arts AoE loopers we have in the game right now. And this buff also further pushes her challenge quest performance, because the MP game boost is a buff that lasts for a single turn, so any face cards after her MP will also get that buff. So she's now going to be able to get her MP back even easier, despite maybe you're not using the full double Castoria comp with her. And also, the 20% arts down is a 3-turn effect, so if you're hitting the same target repeatedly with her MP, you're going to be able to stack a bunch of arts downs on top of her skill 3's defense down. So eventually you'll be doing massive amounts of damage against them as long as you spam your MP, which now is extremely easy. Funnily enough, this buff also came with a bug where the skill 3 I just mentioned earlier is only supposed to cast the defense down after she attacks the target with an arts card, including her MP, but for a brief amount of time, the defense down actually happened before the MP does damage, only for the MP, by the way. It never changed for her face cards. So because of that, Lysenko identified it as a bug and patched it out. So any of the looping number demonstrations you see about her on YouTube that, is posted right after her MP upgrade is overshooting her damage. Like, her damage is no longer that good because the 20% defense down no longer happens. But still, this is a really solid buff regardless. And then we also got Red Hare. So Red Hare's second skill got a buff where both of his Star Absorb Up and Invul Pierce, which used to be RNG effects, are no longer RNG. And both of their durations are extended to 3 turns. And on top of that, Red Hare also got a 15 Star Bomb as well as a 15 star per turn generation effect for 3 turns. So this is an insanely powerful buff. Now he can easily deal with invul or evade spamming enemies, and he doesn't even need to use his MP to trigger that effect. The Star Absorb Up makes his crits even more consistent. Now he doesn't even need to make that many stars because he's already a rider. His Star Absorb Up is already really high. With this Absorb buff, it's now through the roof. And in terms of stars, he makes them very easily now. I really like the combination of star bombs and star per turn. We saw this kind of stuff on Ruler Melusine, and obviously it's still going to be really good for someone like Red Hare. And despite him being a quick servant, he can't really spam his MP as easily, so he doesn't have the easy access to like 99 stars every turn, unlike some of the top tier quick loopers in the game. So I think this is overall a super solid buff. It gives him a niche of Invul Pierce, as well as just enhancing his ability to crit. Now he just needs better buffs for his crit steroids on his first and third skill. I guess we'll see in the future. And then finally, the buff we got today, the big one, we got a Merlin buff. And just because this is on Merlin, it's probably one of the most impactful buffs this anniversary. But his illusion got a buff, the cooldown got reduced from 7 to 6, and he also had his star generation boost for the party extended to 3 turns instead of just 1 turn. And on top of that, the skill also gives the entire party 3 turn 50% crit up, as well as 10 MP charge. So this is a great buff, of course. Having Illusion be a 6-turn cooldown skill is definitely more in line with modern servant standards, and the star generation boost being extended to 3 turns means that he gives an even better source of star generation, specifically buster units with really good hit count cards as well as MPs. So they're almost going to feel like quick servants when this effect is taking into effect, for star generation at least. And of course, the party-wide 50% crit up is arguably the most important effect of this buff because it solves one of the big gripes people had with Merlin, where he brands himself as a buster crit support, but his crit steroid has really bad uptime. It's only a 1-turn effect on a 6-turn cooldown. So now with this buff, he not just increased his maximum damage burst potential in a single turn, because now he can give you 150% crit for a turn, but also he just has better sustain crit steroids for the entire party. So that is also a great effect. And then finally, the party-wide 10 MP charge, I think, is the most insignificant effect in terms of buffs. It obviously helps. 30 is just a way more comfortable number to work with than 20, but I don't think it's gonna help him with farming that much. There's definitely comps that already exist that does use him for farming in substitution of Waver. Back in the day, some people are using Plug Waver instead of Plug Oberon for certain units, and now Merlin can potentially do the same with specific buster loopers, but I just don't think that's that big of a deal. Usually you probably still prefer someone like Oberon, and also for multi-core, it's just not gonna cut it. We obviously have other party-wide 30 chargers that are considered good, like Tez or Koyan Dark, but those units have damaging MPs and they can clear a wave on their own. And Castoria is also great for multi-core farming, and she doesn't have a damaging MP, but Castoria is usually paired with arts units, so arts servants don't need that much battery charge. They have their own inherent refund, unlike bust units, which Merlin is supposed to be paired with. And once again, Castoria also just has 20 more battery than him, because on top of the party-wide 30, she also has a targetable 20. So I don't think Merlin is going to be super relevant in farming at all, but just in the challenge quest as a crit support, he is definitely the premium buster crit support right now, without question in my opinion. And then we also got Nursery Rhyme. It got very much overlooked because everyone's looking at Merlin, but Nursery Rhyme's buff is also really solid. Her skill 2 now gives her an additional 30% arts up for 3 turns, as well as gives all child trait servants 20 MP charge, and all fairy tale trait servants 20% MP damage up for 3 turns. So even if you consider this just for herself, it is a huge damage and refund boost that makes her looping not absolutely horrendous. Like, I mean, she's still an AoE caster, so her damage is probably still horrible, but at the very least, it helps with her looping when compared to other AoE casters. And this also gives her some form of multi-core utility. I will say though, it only really feels good if you are pairing her specifically with a child trait servant that also has fairy tale. So for example, someone like Benienma or Rider Liz pairs very well with Nursery Rhyme. But if you're only getting one of the 2 effects from these, it's not gonna feel that great. But still, being a conditional caster guild essentially is very high praise in my opinion for a 4-star. So that was my personal thoughts on all of the buffs that we got this year anniversary, and I really like this year's lineup. They either fixes a character's problem that people had with them, for example, Hokusai's looping, as well as Nitocris Summer's insta-kill screwing with her looping, or it enhances a character's playstyle and then make them more powerful than they already are. For example, Merlin and Asclepius, like they're still doing what they were doing before the buff, but just a lot better. Or they even elevate some servants and give them new roles. For example, Jill the Ray Saber is now a great, like, lawful good support, and Abigail Williams is now a insanely powerful multi-core farmer. So overall, it's just a bunch of wonderful buffs, and if you really want me to pick like 3 favorites, I definitely go with Merlin, Abigail, and Saber Gilles. But it's really difficult for me to pick just 3 because I like basically all of them. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. It's like super casual, but I just feel like it's more coherent for me to sum it up here instead of, you looking at my 5 a.m. ramblings in one of my demo videos pinned comments. And I'll see you guys in the next one.